My name's Sam McManus. I'm the founder of YellowWood Adventures. We're an adventure travel company currently operating in 8 destinations, of which Lebanon is included. I personally spent just over 2 months myself in Lebanon last year, 2019, on 2 different trips, a mix of leading groups, doing some research, and having a whole lot of fun as well. So I just thought I'd, over the next half an hour, tell you a little bit about this fantastic country. I've called it this short talk at the crossroads, and that's for a number of different reasons, and I think it really sums up what Lebanon is as a country. It refers to the current political situation. Lebanon is going at a real crossroads or fork in the road, if you like. Politically, there's been huge protests, mainly peaceful, across the country for reasons that I'll go into shortly, and they're trying to make a better life for themselves. I think Lebanon currently in the world has one of the 3rd highest international debts, just because they've been really unlucky with some terrible political decisions. It's also at the crossroads geographically. It's on the far east of the Mediterranean, and it really feels like I'm well-traveled in Europe and well-traveled in the Middle East, and when you're there, it feels like such a crossroads between these 2 cultures of East and West. You go into, half of the country is Muslim, half is Christian. You go into a church, and there's a picture of Jesus, and above Jesus it has writing in Arabic, in gold, and you're like, well, these are really, really strange. And you have a mosque next to a church, the famous mosque in downtown Beirut, which has been seeing a lot of the protests. So it has that mix geographically as well, and then historically as well. It's been, the thoroughfare from Crusaders to the Islamic Caliphate to the Ottomans to the Romans. Obviously, it has the most significant Roman temples, structures still surviving outside of Italy. So it's just got everything to play for, really. This is the trip that we do, and it's quite a useful map. I couldn't actually find a better one, because we do this in 9 days, but it gives you a real sense of the main places to go and see in Lebanon and what is safe to do so. And I think that's the main question that people ask me most of the time. As a company, we operate in frontier destinations, or certainly off the beaten track. This isn't exactly a beach holiday in Marbella, but people say to me, is it safe to go? And then how do I answer that question? Well, this is how we do it, and as how you should probably be looking at destinations as well. There are 3 touch points, really, that we go by. The first one is the FCO, which is the British Foreign and Commonwealth Office. You can go onto their website for any country, and it will give you an update of the political situation. Is it safe to go? Where isn't safe to go? If people know the country, Lebanon, the one place we're missing up here is the northern city of Tripoli, quite close to the Syrian border, not to be confused with the Tripoli in Libya. Now, we don't go there because it's the one place in the country that the FCO advises travel against, because I don't really like it anyway. It's just a very busy, polluted, bustling Arabic town. It's smelly, but they just think it's a bit too close to home for Syria, and they just say, don't go there. And so what's very important is, if you are British and you can't take out travel insurance and then go to Tripoli, because then your travel insurance would be void. And as an operator, we're certainly not going to take anyone who doesn't have valid travel insurance. So that's the first one. You go and check the FCO and what they're saying. And we run tours in Iran as well. For example, I've led 3 trips in Iran. Personally, it's a fantastic country. The FCO is currently advising against travel to Iran. So for us, it's just off the menu. There's no question. Doesn't mean you have to follow them. We also have 2 further touch points. The other one is we always work with a local operator in every country you work in. And then we have our own judgment as well. So when the protests were going on recently in Beirut, they're not targeted towards tourists. They're political. They were mainly peaceful until Hezbollah decided to come and beat up some of the protesters. Apart from that, they were doing okay. I flew out 10 days earlier just to go on the ground and see if it was okay. I was like, okay, there's a few roads blocked, but it's fine. The tourists came, and we did this tour over 9 days, and we had an absolutely fantastic time. And quite a few of the pictures you'll see now from that trip. Lebanon, I mean, it's such a diverse, historic, incredible country, and so difficult to sum up in even half an hour. This is the Lebanese flag. The symbol is el-aris, which is Arabic for the cedar tree. I think Lebanon is mentioned something like 72 times in the Old Testament. It's hugely religious for both Christians and Muslims, of course. And here's quite a nice quote here from one of the Psalms. So we'll start in Beirut, party town. Seriously, nightlife, off the chain. Lebanese people are very glamorous. They love to party. They love good food. Obviously, you'll know, I'm sure many of you have been to Lebanese restaurants. And Beirut sums up all of those things. It's on the city. It's on the Mediterranean. But then you have this beautiful, you can actually see here the famous mosque and the church right next to it. The church was actually built before the mosque. And it was just this high. I think it's a perfect replica of some church in Europe. I can't actually remember, to be perfectly honest. The Muslims decided to build the mosque next to it. And so the church was like, well, they can't be higher than us. So then they built this tower. So then they're at the exact same height, which I think is quite funny. And then Beirut itself is just a fabulous mix of sort of sexy French architecture, crazy modern stuff, old traditional. Many of you will have heard of Lebanon for the civil war, which ravaged the country from 1975 to 1990. I mean, for 15 years, it was an absolute bloodbath, and they've left a lot of buildings. This is one that was on the famous Green Line that goes through the city, dividing the two main fronts. And you can just see bullet holes, and they've left a lot of these within the city as reminders. I tried to read some of the history of the Civil War. I mean, it's just a mess. It wasn't even Christians fighting Muslims. It was Christians fighting different sects of Christians, fighting Muslims who were fighting the Druze who were also Muslims. Oh, and then the Israelis invaded. Oh, and then the Syrians got involved. And it's just, like I said, it was a bloodbath. It's over, thankfully. But so many people were displaced. I have friends in Lebanon, and, you know, we were having dinner, and they're about my age, in sort of mid to late 30s, and they were telling me they remembered as being young girls, like their parents taking them under cover of night and saying you have to be really quiet, and getting on boats and just fleeing on the Mediterranean because it was so dangerous. Similarly, I've heard stories of people would go up to the mountains during the Civil War and just like have parties under the cedar trees and like have discotheques and stuff. So nothing will get the Lebanese people down. In the center of Beirut, you have, this is actually right next to the church I just showed you, Roman ruins of the Roman baths. So you're constantly, when you're moving around, you're constantly reminded of different cultures, languages, and different eras. This has been, well, Byblos, which we're going to look at, is known as the oldest continuously inhabited village in the whole world. So this is just some more pictures of downtown Beirut, and they've got a fabulous national museum as well. This chap is one of the local guides that works for us, Emmanuel. He's a really, really excellent tour guide, and this was some of the group that we took around. So as I said, I was there during the protests, which is still kind of ongoing, have calmed down. It was the first time the country really came together recently, and I say mainly peaceful. Most of them really were mainly peaceful process. Often you would get different sects of the different religions or different stratas of society protesting for one thing or another. This was the first time where the whole country came together in a very spontaneous movement, and it was a build-up of lots of different factors. Essentially, my limited understanding is, during the Civil War, you had lots of groups of men, essentially, who were warlords, you know, and all these rival it was such a fragmented war. You had these sort of people who would build a power base and have followers with machine guns, and they called themselves the princes of war, or in Arabic, it's Umara al-Kharab. And when the war was over, most of them went into politics. So you still get that sort of strong-arm political weight over the people. And I'll be honest, they've just creamed so much wealth off the top of the country through corruption. It's why the country's so heavily indebted. And there have just been huge problems with infrastructure, especially with the Syrian civil war. You know, 2 million Syrian refugees came into Lebanon. And there were just like basic government amenities, like clearing out the trash wasn't being done properly from the streets. But then there's always a straw that breaks the camel's back, the government tried to impose a tax on WhatsApp, which is obviously free, and everyone was just went mad. Just was like, it was just too much. So people just erupted into the streets with flags like you can see here, all denominations, all religions, and have been I mean, it was more like a party a lot of the time, and DJs came down and I saw belly dancers and it was all quite fun. But there was a strong message of just like, we need change. And President Hariri has since stepped down. We're in kind of a little bit of a limbo at the moment. I haven't checked the BBC in the last couple of days, so things might be changing. But there's definitely real change happening in the country. The good news is, as I said, I was taking tourists around during this time, and no one wants to damage the economy anymore. Tourism is very important for the country. And obviously, any talk of civil war days is long in the past. These were just some pictures I took from my iPhone when I was there. This is downtown Beirut. I'm sure you saw it in the news. That's actually the inside of the mosque. Wow, running out of time. So this is a picture from, let's move out of the city. So this is a picture of Ras Beirut, which means the head of Beirut. It's on a little peninsula. And, you get out of the city and you realize you're on the Mediterranean. Come down the coast, you come to Sidon. And this is a famous Crusader castle that's built there. I'm not sure you can see very well. I've got some better pictures later. Can you see there's some like round pieces of stone in there? Fantastic Christian warriors came down to Lebanon, found a beautiful Roman temple, smashed that up, cut the pillars in half and used the pillars as infrastructure to build their castle. You'll see this quite a lot. It's a beautiful castle there. And in fact, what's really interesting, I don't actually have a picture of it here, but the Crusaders smashed down the Roman temple, used it to build their castle. The Ottomans later came and then have built a mosque on top of this castle as well. It's, wherever you walk, you can just see you're literally walking over history. Some of the Roman ruins on the coast have survived. A little bit further down the coast, you come to Tyre, and there's a beautiful, there were some Roman bars, and here's some pillars there's an amphitheatre as well. We walked through the spice market, and then the ruins, wait till you see Baalbek, but even the ruins down here are absolutely incredible. You come down here and take a left. A lot of it hasn't survived, but you can see the outline of a stadium, the Roman stadium, which is honestly like as big as a modern-day football stadium. And of course, the mountains. These are up in Shuf. This is a little fortress called Niha here. Lebanon was called, or still is called for a long time, Switzerland of the Middle East. Some people call Beirut the Paris of the Middle East, just because it has such beautiful mountains, heavy snow, you can go skiing there. And what it's most famous for, of course, are the cedar forests. I was lucky enough to come up here during winter. I didn't go skiing, but I went snowshoeing, which is quite popular around the Qadisha Valley. And it's just, you're in the Middle East, but you're surrounded by, snow falling on cedars, and it's a really wonderful place to be. There's beautiful old Lebanese houses. This is a fantastic example of one. The first time I went, I remember going to Lebanon, and it felt so familiar, but so different, and I couldn't quite put my finger on it because it has a lot of the houses are built in beautiful stone and red tiling. And I was like, what is this? And it took me a while to click, but, they feel like little mini Roman villas. And I've spent a lot of time in Italy. I grew up reading Asterix and Obelix cartoons, and this is what it feels like. There's a very Roman feel to the place now. I think one of the clients took this on their iPhone. Yeah, I always put on quite a lot of weight when I go to Lebanon. You can see it in my face. Shawarma. My favorite is the hummus with malachmir, with fried meat in the middle, dripping in olive oil and pine nuts. Tabbouleh. I'm sure anyone, if you've been to a Lebanese restaurant, you know what it's like. It's absolutely great. There's two main mountain ranges. Lebanon's just a thin strip on the map with the Mediterranean on the left and Syria on the north and northeast, and then Israel in the south. And there are two mountain ranges that come down. The first is the Lebanon Mountain Trail, or the Lebanese mountains. And there's actually, you can walk from the very north of the country to the very south. It's called the LMT, the Lebanese Mountain Trail. I've walked about 5 days of it. The whole thing, you could do it, if you're walking fast, you could do it in 3 weeks, but most people sort of do it in about a month and take their time. And then there's the anti-Lebanon Mountain Trail, which separates the country with Syria. And in between those two mountain ranges, you have the Bekaa Valley. And it's basically stepping out of the Middle East and going into southern France because it's filled with vineyards. And this is at Chateau Kefraya. They've got a little tractor that you go around and see the vineyards, and they do wine tasting, and there's a delicious restaurant there where you can go for dinner. And it's just absolutely beautiful. It's still a little bit drier than France, maybe, so these are the Lebanese mountains. If you were to go over these, you get back to the Kadisha Valley and then the Mediterranean. But the wine is absolutely stupendous, and Lebanon's just fun. You've always got good food, you've always got good wine. You're always going to have those things. That's actually the restaurant in, sorry, the photo's not very good quality, but that's the restaurant in Chateau Kefraya. You can sit outside, or they've got a huge indoor section as well. Baalbek is the name for the Roman ruins, which are there. They're up in the north of the Kadisha Valley, closer to the Syrian border. And you can't really quite, until you go there and see it, you can't actually quite believe how much really remains. There were two main temples. This was the entranceway going in. This is the temple to Dionysus. And this is the temple to Bacchus, the god of wine and fun. Very fitting that they built this in this country. And Emmanuel, actually, the tour guide I pointed you out to, he always does the same joke when he's there, if he has pretty girls on the tour, that he heard from a different tour guide. He explains how they used to have orgies and have drunken romps in the temple, and then he says, "Oh, can you feel the sexual energy?" And then it's just really awkward for everyone. And I'm like, "Come on, Emmanuel, get a girlfriend." And then when you go inside, the roof is gone, but this is how big, and there's a mark up here on the wall of how just it was left for centuries to degradation, and everyone was just fighting, and the Ottomans were fighting whoever, and by the time they excavated it, the natural soil had come up to this level, and they had to scoop it out and dig it away over time. And partly for that reason, it is just so well preserved. And outside of Baalbek is a piece of heritage which is just as special, the Hotel Palmyra. Still the best, or certainly the oldest, place in town. From here, and we stayed in these rooms, you can look across to the Roman ruins, which they light up at night. And yeah, the photos just don't do it justice. It's just super old, and it's just a really interesting place to stay and go and explore the town of Baalbek. Baalbek itself, because it's closer to Syria, it's a little bit more, I'd say, fundamentalist is a strong word, but it's more Muslim. So you can't really sort of go buy alcohol in the streets, but they serve wine here. We go out for dinner, but then we'd stay up in the bar. Someone told me the bar in the Palmyra is the oldest bar in the Middle East. I'm pretty skeptical on that, but we went drinking there just in case. The Kadisha Valley. So you would then, after Baalbek, we come back over the Lebanese mountain range, as I told you, down into the Kadisha Valley. And the Kadisha Valley is truly historic. It has been a stronghold for a lot of Christian communities who hid here in caves when the Mamelukes, which was one sect of Muslim invaders, invaded in, I can't remember when. But it has a very, very strong, so whereas Baalbek is predominantly Muslim, the Kadisha Valley, I mean, look at it, it's fantastic, is predominantly Christian. This is in the summertime, but these in winter, it is covered in snow. And from here, we actually drove over down the road here, but they've got some ski runs. And this is where some of the cedar forests are based as well. This is the town of Bishare here, with the beautiful cathedral. And in the rainy season, when the snow starts to melt, all down the valley, you get these huge cascading waterfalls. And there's a hiking trail, the LMT, the Lebanon Mountain Trail I mentioned, actually goes down and runs through that valley. Here's some pictures of us doing a short hike in that valley. And as I said, some of the caves, all the caves are still preserved. Some of them have turned into sort of rock churches. And there's one hermit who still lives there. There were two until about 3 years ago, but the two other hermits became too old and have been moved into a monastery, which I'm about to show you. And this is the last remaining hermit, who's Colombian, which was a bit of a letdown, if I'm perfectly honest. So we went up to see him, and he's not Lebanese, and all he wanted to know what was the score of the football. And we were just all like, all right, where are the real hermits around here? So the real hermits live in St. Anthony's Monastery, and it is as beautiful as it looks in the pictures. We stay the night, well, that's the monastery here for the monks. Up here, there's a hotel. The Gaeta Grotto, I don't actually have many good pictures from here because you're not actually allowed to take pictures inside. But we did this one, and this stretches for kilometers and kilometers. You have to come back round to the Mediterranean, and there's a whole cave system, one of which you need to take a boat through and one of which you can walk through. It was supposed to be, or supposedly, the 8th wonder of the world, never made it into the record books. I've been all over the place. I've never seen anything like it. I'd highly recommend just going to see even that. Finishing off on, so we've done, if you can imagine, we've done our loop down to the Shuf Mountains. We went up to the Bekaa Valley. We went to Baalbek. We've come back to the Kadisha Valley. We're just on the home straight now, coming down the coast back to Beirut. You have Byblos, which in Arabic they call it Jebel, is the, I mean, I'm sure some other towns will argue this point, but it is certainly one of the oldest continuously inhabited villages in the world. It's where the Phoenicians are from, the famous boat builders that you will read about. And what did they build their boats from? The cedars, the famous El Adis Lebanese cedar. And they used to ship the wood to the ancient Egyptians who used to make their boats from the cedar wood, which they'd sail down the Nile as well. It's a tiny place. Really, really tiny. There's some beautiful, the harbour stretches around here a little bit more. There's beautiful seafood restaurants, most famous of which is Pepe's, called. Unfortunately, Pepe has now passed away. But you can read a little obituary about him in the menu, and he's there with a sailor's cap and like a cheeky wink. And it talks about him traveling all around the world and coming back to Lebanon and building an empire, and then it just finishes up something like, even to his dying day, he was a ladies' man. It's like, go Pepe. This is apparently one of the most photographed house in Lebanon, because it sits on the peninsula just outside of Byblos. It's run down, but the government's supposedly going to turn it into a museum. But it's just a perfect example also of a traditional Lebanese architecture. Do you see what I mean about that kind of Roman feeling you get from it? And then the castle at Byblos, again, a much bigger castle than at Sidon, built by the Crusaders. Oh yeah, and here, that much better picture of, you can see again where they've trashed a Roman temple to build on top of it. There's a nice chunk of the wall taken out because the Crusaders built it. Some Muslim army, I can't remember who, came and reconquered it. The Crusaders then came by. It wasn't the Crusaders, it was later. It was a British gunship, came through and blew a section of the wall out. I mean, this is the Middle East. There's always something going on. And it's to actually walk through the country and see the physical examples of that everywhere you turn. It's absolutely fantastic. So we've just got a couple of minutes for any questions. I don't feel like I've done the country justice, but if you have any questions, please do let me know. It's doable. I mean, the first time I went there, I went on a research trip and did it myself. The buses are very unreliable, take a long time, don't really always end up going where you want them to go. You can get taxis, but that's very, very expensive. Not trying to steer you off, doing a group tour. You could totally do it. You could hire a car. The roads in Lebanon are just as manic and crazy as most other Arabic countries. Drink driving is quite a popular pastime. Most people just drive home from the nightclubs at like 4 a.m. with beers, and we'll go to like an army checkpoint, and they're like, Saidi Watan, Yatik Al-Afi. It's like, yeah, yalla, whatever. And they're like drinking while they're driving. I've never seen anything like it. So, anything is doable. It's definitely going to be more difficult and a bumpier ride, but hey, that can be half the fun sometimes. It depends what you're looking for.
I always place the cost of living on the price of a beer. What's the price of a beer?
It will depend. Beirut's just a big bubble. in itself. Lebanon is reassuringly expensive as a country. Unfortunately, because of the high taxes, because of the messed up government, the cost of living is very high, therefore the cost of it, that filters down to the cost of everything. You can go to like the super clubs in Lebanon and, you know, pay like $25 for a beer, which is ridiculous. Of course, as soon as you get out of that and you get up into the mountains, it's just like a couple of quid. You can buy an amazing bottle of wine for about £6, and I do mean amazing. So, you know, once you're out of Beirut, you're out of that bubble. It's just, yeah, it's kind of normal.
If it was out having a meal in Beirut, what would you be paying?
You can, like most cities, you've got a real mix. You can go very, very high end. Bit of a cheapskate, will go and get a shawarma for like £2, and it's about this big, and will fill you up amazingly. You've got the whole spectrum of really, really great restaurants. Some are cheap and some are expensive. You just choose which one you want, really. Yes? Yeah, totally. Yeah, I forgot to mention. I knew there was something I'd forget. Another reason it's such at the crossroads geographically is nearly every Lebanese person will speak Arabic, English, and French, often in the same sentence. So they Yes. At the moment, we're only doing, well, basically, we don't run a trip with more than 12 people. So we've got about 3 scheduled dates. When they fill up, which they're filling up already, we'll just open a new one. So we've got one in April and one in October. And then I think those are starting to fill up, so we're going to start opening them up. So just have a look on our website. That's a good point. If you exit out of here, we're just on F5, the stand there. Come and have some Ethiopian coffee. That's one of our destinations, or ask me any other questions you like. Yes, please. Well, that's a really good question. You're pretty much okay all year round. I mean, in the winter, it depends what you're going for. If you want to go in the winter and going skiing, it's going to be cold, but you get fantastic snow. The summer months will be very, very hot, probably a little bit too hot. So if you're just going for like a sightseeing tour, spring and autumn's your best bet. But like I said, depends what you're going for. This tour? Roughly, our tour's about, I think, £1,600, all included. That's everything, except for flights. But yeah, come and grab a brochure. But flights to Beirut, you're looking about £400. So they're not that expensive at all, unless if you book in advance. Yes. Say again, sorry. Yeah, you can go British Airways. I normally fly Middle East Airlines, which is the national carrier, just because it's cheaper. Normally go through Istanbul. Just stick it into Skyscanner. Again, it just depends when you want to go as well. Some will fly in at different times. I doubt it. No, I haven't seen them. Well, don't mention that to the Lebanese. If you've got an Israeli stamp on your passport, they probably won't let you in. Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. Cheers.